Okay, are you seeing it? Okay. So there's four elements of club infrastructure. And again, I just, like we said earlier, it's not like these are the 10 things, but they're a good 10 things. And so we kind of use it as a guide to talk about different elements of having a healthy club. So there's four within this category, and Sunny and I are going to kind of lead the discussion. There are a couple of hyperlinks, which we will get into. So why don't we start with communicate openly in your club? And this is the one where there's a hyperlink to the brand center. So if you haven't seen it, let me, that is here. So Rotary.org, the login is down right now, but luckily the brand center is available without logging in. So this is what the brand center looks like. And Sunny, is this one where I was going to take the lead?
No.
You are. Okay. Have at it. What do you want me to bring up? Keep this up?
That's fine. Let's just bring the people up. I think that's where we want to start.
The people of action?
No, the people in the room.
Oh, stop sharing.
Yes.
People.
People.
People. That's what this is about, right? So basically in this session, this part, we have four of these that we're going to cover in infrastructure. There's governing documents, there's leadership transition and how you set that up, the communicating clearly. And what is our other one? Creating practical committees. So Jeff will take two, I'll take two. We're starting with communication. And this is, I think, maybe the most important thing in Rotary is communicating, because that's where everything starts and ends, isn't it? So, couple questions. First of all, how do you stay connected and informed as a club?
We have a weekly newsletter, right, that goes out, and it does highlight things that are happening or happened, and then upcoming speakers, of course, and then connecting to the other clubs. And it has all the board members listed and some of our committee assignments.
Excellent. That's a great tool, is it not? Do you have any tricks for making sure people read it?
Yeah, kind of struggle with that. There for a while, we got so fancy that, you'd send out a 10 megabyte file every week. And I think that really knocks down the usefulness, where people click on it, it may take a while to open, or they don't want to open up a file that big to begin with. So, I think having some headlines in the body of the email is the best, that teases what's in the document.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Yes,
Could
go
I
ahead.
tag on to Mark? I agree that I send out our club newsletter, so obviously it's very well done.
Of course.
But our club meets on Tuesday, so I always send it out at 6 a.m. on Monday, so everybody knows when it's supposed to show up. And then, like Mark said, I try and keep it short, not too long, and I try and make it interesting by including people's names. Everybody loves to see their name in the newsletter, so I think that's just all I had to say.
That's a great tip, actually. Thank you. Yes, Meredith.
All right, so we have like the most amazing public image chair ever this year. And so as the bulletin editor and webmaster, because we really use Club Runner a lot in our bulletin, it pulls stuff in from the website, so it makes it really nice and interactive. But Jeff and I work really hand in hand. So the same information's on Facebook that's on the bulletin. So it really goes together. And then we have the secretary has an email regime where we're emailing before meetings. And so it's all really consistent. So people know when they're getting the different kinds of conversations. Since I do email marketing for a living, like that's literally my paid job. My hint about getting people to open things is one, consistency, like people need to know when it's coming. And then second is, and I don't do this with the bulletin, which is really funny, but don't be afraid to play with subject lines, to use emojis, because if people aren't opening their email the emails, it's 100% the subject line because they don't know what's inside. So we do that with meeting announcements. Sometimes we'll do something a little interesting and curious so that people will be intrigued enough to open up the email.
Can you give us an example?
One is like, hey, are you still interested in Rotary? Just like see what people do. Making little puns about, Valentine's Day or whatever. And
Yeah,
that's like the secretary does that. But I would say like the real key to communication is having your bulletin person and your public image person work together so that your messaging is compatible between the two things, and use Club Runner because it makes it super easy to update your website and do your bulletin at the same time.
and I want to build on several things you said there. Let me quickly mention, Jeff called our attention to the Brand Center at the beginning of this session, and that has templates for newsletters, for brochures, for things that you might want to use to communicate with your club and actually communicate with the community as well. So don't forget to use that. And now we've talked about newsletters, we've talked about email, and we've talked a little bit about websites and social media. Are there any other pieces of the communication process or communication tools that we want to think about to make sure everyone's in the loop? We must have some members who aren't tech savvy, right? Go ahead,
Yeah.
Mark.
Well, I was just going to say back to, I think, the point about open communication being important. I know, Martine, our president this year, every single meeting makes a point at the end of opening the floor to anyone. So besides the good news and other announcements, he makes sure that anybody who has any concern, any question, whatever, can bring it up. And I think that creates a nice feeling of openness for everyone in the club. So just
That's
as
a
more
really
ad hoc thing.
great idea, Mark. Thank you.
Sunny,
Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, one thing that you kind of alluded to is that one thing we learn with our membership is that there's not like a one size fits all for everyone, and that there are some people that are not tech savvy. I remember when we started having email as our primary communication, and there were a few people that said, "I don't have a computer." So part of understanding the membership, if you're an incoming president, is do they have a preferred method of communication? If they do, is there a way to kind of have it be part of the communication infrastructure that we have without, adding work? But there is kind of the people do prefer certain approaches, and it's at least good to know what they are, even if we can't optimize that in terms of how we share information among the membership.
That's so key, Jeff. Thank you. Because some people won't respond to anything but a fax, or anything but a voicemail. How many of you actually call people? Does anybody do that?
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah,
getting
we have gone to also every week we pick a member who we haven't seen in a while, and we write them a handwritten note. We have cards on the table, and everybody gets to write to that person to invite them back. Hey, we're saving a seat. You missed a great program. We miss you. All of that. And it makes a difference. People respond to that. They do come back.
Mark, that's really great. I've been thinking about getting in touch with people, and usually it falls on one or two members, but putting cards on the table so that everyone shares in the process is really brilliant. And yeah, people appreciate being talked to one-on-one sometimes. Are there any other avenues that I know we have to wind up and go to the next one, but any avenues that people are using other than Martine's very strategic opening the meeting at the end? Any other ways to get feedback? Yes.
I do. So what we do is we have our meetings every other Wednesday for our big club, and then every other Wednesday for satellite. So I take it upon myself that the evening before the meeting, okay, I will text every single member what is going on at the next meeting, okay? Encourage them to be at the meeting the following day. And I personalize it. Yes, it takes time, okay? I will send a letter, for example, good evening, Dax and Holland. I put the wife in there. Hope the boys are doing great, okay? I saw on Facebook that you were skiing last weekend. Just a reminder about tomorrow's meeting. Boom. Okay. It takes a couple of hours every Tuesday night, but guess what? We get a lot of attendance, and people will come up to me and tell me, what kind of program do you have that does that? And I say, it's not a program. Okay. It's making them feel good because it's not just a text. They know that I'm sending them a text to him, his wife, and asking about their kids, you know?
Yes.
And it really, really, I think that's the communication that I have learned that really, really brings everybody together, makes them come to meetings. And I believe that that's how come we had 85 people at our meeting last night.
I'm certain of it. That's really a wonderful reminder to all of us that this is all about the people, really. And it may take a little extra time, but if you're talking about member engagement and member retention and strong, vibrant clubs, there's probably no substitute for treating people like people. Jeff, that seems like a good way to wind this up. Do you agree?
I do. Let me share my screen again.
Okay.
Quick question, was this the infrastructure group?
Yes.
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 Okay, so we covered communicate openly in your club. Sunny, why don't we go to the prepare members for future roles? For smooth
Okay,
leadership?
sure.
All right,
That one's mine too, as I recall.
it is.
Did everyone see that one? Prepare members for future roles to smooth leadership transition. We don't have any links on this one, do we, as I recall?
No, it's just a discussion.
Continuity and on-the-job training. Okay, people again, please.
You got it.
There are really two questions here, aren't there? One is, do you have a succession plan? Do you have a way of bringing new people into the pipeline for leadership roles? And the other is, do you prepare them well for the roles they're going to take on? So let's talk about the first one first. How do you make sure you've got continuity or people lined up to take on the roles next? Anyone have any strategies for that?
I mean, I think we try to intimate to people that we see as rising stars and tell them that we have high hopes and big expectations. And, you know, some of them, particularly if they're young, we've got, you know, a few in our club right now where they're just having kids, you know, for the first time, and they're really busy. And so they're a little bit shy from taking on huge responsibilities, but, you know, they know they're in the pipeline, right, for the future. And then take a little risk this year. A secretary just is going to cross her first year, you know, with the club, and she's going to be an officer. So a little bit of a risk there. She's one of the ones getting married and probably having kids too, but you know, a little bit of a risk there, but you know, put the new members right there in a position of responsibility.
So planting seeds and bringing people along as they're ready and able. Is that?
Yeah, I'm not so sure she's
even
ready
if they're a
or
little
able, but she's gonna do it.
Yes.
I can add that is definitely what the Rotary Club of Albuquerque did to me or for me.
Or with you.
Yeah,
Yes.
or with me. So yeah, definitely prime for several years. And then I would say also start early. Like I said, I'm the president-elect nominee, I guess. And so that's another way to ease the transition, I guess, is that they already have me lined up for a role that still seems pretty far away, and attending things like this and doing
Yeah.
a lot with Patty Hennessy, who's the president-elect already. So that starting early provides a big transition.
That's a really key point, isn't it? Giving people lots of notice so that they can mentally prepare as well as substantively prepare.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone have a standard how do I say this? A standard format. I know, for example, the Roswell Club lines up every board member to move to the next slot at chair. Has anyone seen that in their clubs? It's an interesting approach. If you get into that pipeline, you're pretty much on for 5 years, you know, because you move from board member to secretary to vice president to president to immediate past president. Maybe not everyone is ready for that, but it's an elaboration on what Kristen's talking about. How do you make sure people know what they're getting into? Yes, Marty.
So what we started doing is, we are now having, quarterly meetings for all the new people, okay? We meet on a Saturday morning for 2.5 hours, and I have every single one of my committee members, go to that meeting. We meet with the new members and even some older members, and we go through every single step of what a president is, a treasurer is, a board secretary. They all speak, you know, what the satellite chair does, what membership director does, what our public image does, what our community service does. We give them an overview, okay? It's fantastic. And then we tell the people, what is your interest, okay? Before you leave here, tell us what your interest is, and then we set them up with that committee, the head of that committee, okay? That way they know everything that's going on within the club, what every single thing means, okay? And what is their interest, okay? It got so good that now we're not calling it a new members orientation. We are now calling it a refresher course. So we now have people that are in our club that say, God, I didn't even know anything about this. And I've been in the club for 7 years, you know, and it's really, really worked, getting people engaged, letting them know what the club is all about, what each committee chair stands for, okay, and what is their interest to keep them engaged.
Thank you, Marty. That sounds great. Do you have written job descriptions also?
Yes, we do. And each member gets up there and talks about their job description.
And the meetings, I assume, are publicized in advance, set at a special time that everyone knows about?
Yes, they're quarterly. They're held at a restaurant. One of our members owns a restaurant, and we meet there. And we got, last meeting, we got probably 45 people.
Wow.
Marty, when's the
Yeah.
next one?
What?
Go ahead.
When is the next one? I'd like to be a fly on the wall.
Marty, you muted.
The end of April. We will let you know.
Thank you.
George.
Thank you.
Yeah, we do something similar every month. We have what we call the STAR meeting. So they do that their first year, and we cycle through the officers and the committee chairs so they learn about the club. But not always well attended, but you know, they have to pay for it. So it's kind of like they've got a stake in it already.
Indeed.
What he just said there is very true. We used to have that new member orientation where they would come before the meeting, and then they would for 5 meetings, they would come before the new members, and we would talk about service committee or public image committee, okay? And then you'd have people miss the second meeting, and then you're trying to go back to the first meeting, then you're trying to go over to the third meeting, and this guy didn't go to the first 2 meetings. So I says, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to have 1 meeting, okay? We're going to bring everybody together. We're going to have them commit to 2 to 2.5 hours, and it's more 2 hours. We're going to give them breakfast and have a question and answer and have each committee member talk about everything. And I think that's the key. That way you're not saying, well, I missed that, what a public service was. I missed what a satellite committee was, and it seems to work.
Do you ever have people who can't come to any of them, or that don't make all of them and have to be briefed somehow?
We have not as of yet.
All right, touching wood. And how do you train your incoming officers? How do you make sure they're set up to win, other than knowing what the job description is?
We do a retreat, but
Yeah,
plan.
tell us about that.
So usually about 6 weeks before the year starts, we'll get everybody together and just kind of go through the goals that we've set or that we want to adopt, and then go through the responsibilities. But like in the case of this secretary, you know, I literally had to go find the job description and then share that with them. There was a lot more to it than what I was expecting, actually. Luckily, we have an admin who takes care of a lot of it. But yeah, you know, it's saying, okay, let's sit down and talk about that. So I think over time and before the retreat, I'll probably have some pre-sessions to go over what's expected and what we'd like them to contribute at the retreat. And then everybody gets together to settle on the focus for the year.
Thanks, Mark. Kristen, were you about to say something? No, okay. Does anyone use Rotary resources to train incoming officers? No? Can anyone think of any Rotary resources you might use? You're
Just like what,
sitting in one of them, actually.
yeah, just like what Mark said, I know that next week Sandy Roush is the incoming president for our club. Sandy's has every single committee member meeting at her house, and we're going to do a one-day retreat as to what our goals are going to be for next year, what is expected. If anybody has any reservations about something, let's fix it there before the new year starts.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. Yes, John.
So I've been kind of fast tracked
Jason.
into this role because there was some shake. Some people couldn't fulfill their roles and what have you. So yeah, Sandy, as I was public image chair for about 6 months, when suddenly, guess what? You're I don't know if you call it vice president or president elect, or but that's where I'm sitting now. So it seems to me like right away I got they had the pets training, and now Sandy's putting together a leadership and board member training. So I'm just learning as I go, but it seems to me there's a lot of resources both within our Rotary websites and also face-to-face meetings.
Thanks. You're right. You're absolutely right. And JJ, we've got not just pets and club stuff, but we've got the Learning Center and we've got Rotary Leadership Institute. And now
Right.
we're going to shift to Jeff because we've got a couple more topics.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Great job.
So the last two we're going to cover, 1 second. Okay. So the last two we're going to cover are club bylaws and practical committees. And so I'm going to stop sharing and get back to people mode, as Sunny said. If you have not yet had the opportunity, reviewing your club bylaws is always a good thing to do as part of your president-elect year, just to get acclimated, especially if you haven't had much of an opportunity to review them before. There's always some interesting things in bylaws, and they do change. During COVID, things changed in terms of virtual meetings and all of that. So have any of you had a chance to review your club bylaws and kind of get familiar with what's included in them? It's a lot of fun. You know, fun clubs. Bylaws are fun. So if you're not, so there's two documents that are really important in terms of club infrastructure. One are the bylaws, which the club owns them. It's the club's responsibility to make sure that the bylaws fit the club and how it functions. And then there's the club constitution, which Rotary International basically gives to the club. There's no wiggle room with the constitution. And I believe a constitution comes out once every 3 years. I think it's 3 years. Is that right, Sunny?
I don't actually know. I
Okay.
thought it was more often than that, but
It
whenever
may be.
they get, yeah.
So what'll happen is if Rotary International contacts you as an incoming president and says, here's the new constitution, then you need to adapt it. And all it is putting in your club name and Rotary Club number, and that becomes the Constitution for however long it is. The bylaws are the clubs. That's what the club massages and amends and changes based on what the club is doing and how the club is functioning. It's important that the two align, though. So the bylaws need to align with the Constitution. Think of it as like the overall governing structure for all Rotary clubs. So, so again, any of you, and I know Marty has experience because he's current president and was president before, but any of you have some familiarity with your club bylaws and kind of what's in them?
See a couple of nods.
Okay. And there is a hyperlink to recommended bylaws, and it basically it's just a template, and it explains things like when the club meets and the notion of the board and the committees and all that. So it is really important, and you know, bylaws can be amended, things change. So it's good in your role as incoming president to really become familiar with the club's bylaws and think about whether there needs to be any adjustments for the upcoming Rotary year. It would be a good thing to kind of review with your incoming board before July, so that you've got working bylaws for your president year. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm going to just send a note to the other
I'm
groups.
going to add something while you're doing that. Two things. One is you may not think about this much, but it's demoralizing to have bylaws that do not match what your club is actually doing. So for the sake of integrity and a common foundation, it makes a difference to make sure your bylaws actually reflect your policies, what you stand for. The other thing to say is if you don't have to put something in the bylaws, don't, because the more lengthy and detailed they are, the more often you'll probably find yourself having to amend them, which is annoying.
To jump on that real quickly, bylaws change all the time, especially when you have a larger club and they've got to be up to date. For example, you know, we have for 26 years, we had a gala every single year and X amount of the money went to our foundation, okay? Well,
Right.
it changed a couple of years ago where we have a gala now where we're co-sponsoring a gala for Folds of Honor. Now the money goes not only to, the money now goes to a whole different entity. It goes to Folds of Honor. It no longer goes to the foundation. If you don't
Right.
have your bylaws, there's going to be people that are pissed off on your foundation committee saying, where's my money? Okay. So it's got to be changed every single year. You know, we're constantly changing ours to fit
Well, you
our
know,
club.
one way you can circumvent that is by having a general provision in the bylaws that the beneficiaries for your events will be determined by the board or something like that, or that the committees of the club will be established by the board. And you don't have to have every single thing listed, which then requires you to change it all the time.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just something to think about. Something is likely going to happen when you're president that you were not expecting. And that thing that happens that you were not expecting, that you may end up needing to refer to the bylaws to help figure out how that thing is going to get addressed or resolved. So just, it's just good to keep it in your back pocket, just in case. Practical committees. I really like that it says practical. And we set up the breakout rooms so that this group is mainly large clubs. And with large clubs, there may be more infrastructure to your committees. There may be subcommittees. So what is your experience and your sense of how the committee structure works in your clubs currently?
Oh, say that again.
What is your, how are committees functioning in your clubs currently? How do they function?
I can
I
talk
would-
to that.
Okay,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I mean, we have a huge chart of all the committees, but I think that those committees kind of operate in a vacuum. And, you know, the directors of the committees are supposed to report what's going on, and, you know, we need to get a better handle on who's doing what and how it's working or not. And that's one of my goals as president, to try to, you know, get the directors to understand what their role is and get the committees to be more active. I served as committee chair for the literacy committee, and we had one event a year, but the meetings were sporadic. So I don't know, it needs to get more regular and more energized.
Yeah,
Well,
and on the other end of that, like being the smallest of the large clubs here, we have committees, but it's generally the committee chair and whoever they can rope into coming to the meeting with them, which, you know, like Jeff has tried for Public Image Committee. Oh my gosh, he has had meetings. We've had 3 people on each meetings. What seems to work better is almost like ad hoc committee meetings where we advertise it to the whole club and get them to come and address a specific issue, because people are really afraid to commit to even being on a committee because it's just so much not really a part of our club culture, even though we would all love it to be. People just are like, they'll be part of a project, they'll support a project, but they don't want to be committed to an additional meeting of a committee every month.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
just to kind of wrap this up, you know, Sunny walked us through the open communication part of infrastructure. And as you were mentioning, Patty, with larger clubs, when there's all these different committees and things, that communication part so that they're not working in silos is really important, not just between the committees, but with the committees and the others also. That's something to think about. These 10 elements are not silos either. There's a lot of overlap between these principles. So
It's Jeff and me. We are going to talk about club infrastructure, which sounds a little dull. However, when you think about it, having a solid foundation that we share is what allows the magic to happen. So in this section, there are 4 topics. There's governing documents, or making sure bylaws and constitution and everything else is up to date. And then practical committees, communicating openly with everyone in your club, and making sure that your leaders are empowered to take the reins, preparing your members for future roles to smooth leadership transition. Jeff, do you want to start this time?
no, go ahead, because I'm still making sure people are in the right rooms.
Okay, deal. Well, let's talk about communication then, which I think is probably the most important thing human beings do. My favorite quote about communication is from George Bernard Shaw, who said, the principal difficulty with communication is the illusion that it has occurred. So it's not really a matter of what you put out, but how do you make sure everybody gets it? How do you keep everyone in your club in the loop and feeling like they matter? Would you like someone like to tell us what their strategies are for this? How do you communicate with your members and stay connected and informed as a club?
So I'll jump in. Rotary Club of Albuquerque, and we we use Constant Contact as a format. And that goes out, I'm going to say 3, it might be 4 times a week. And I'm sure people feel inundated, but it goes out. So our meetings are on Monday at noon for lunch. A Constant Contact goes out midweek, the week before the meeting. It goes out Friday, the week before the meeting, and then it goes out Monday morning before the meeting. And it not only alerts people to the meeting, who the speaker is going to be, that sort of thing, but it also serves as sort of a mini newsletter, because it gives things that are coming up in the club, service projects that are happening, fundraiser, the fundraiser that's coming up. Just a lot of information that club members would like to know and need to know to be engaged with what's happening in the club. And as I say, I think that goes out 3 times. I think that's accurate, but it's a very effective tool.
Mark, thank you. That sounds great. For those of us who aren't familiar with Constant Contact, could you just say a couple things about what it is and how it works?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a communication platform that you can load your membership emails into. One of the things that happens, so I've heard, I haven't tried it, but one of the things that happens nowadays, if you try to do a mass communication at a certain threshold, the internet will identify it as spam. And won't deliver it to everyone. But with a platform like Constant Contact, and I believe there's a small fee to use it, and I think the fee is based upon the number of people that you're sending it to. So they're increments, but if it's 100 and below, I think it's a very small fee, and then it goes up gradually from there with the number that you have. I don't know if it's its own company or if it's an app that is
Something to
developed.
look into.
Yeah, but
Thank
it's
you.
really and you can do a lot of stuff with it. It supports images, it supports graphics, it supports different colors. I mean, so that it's very appealing.
You can make
to
it
the eye when people
interesting.
get it. Yeah, exactly.
And now for everyone, how do you make sure whatever you're sending, how many of you have a newsletter, a club newsletter? Does everyone? A couple of us, not everyone. What do the rest of you use to let everyone know what's in the loop?
We use Club Runner, and essentially it just sends emails to everybody. And we meet Tuesdays at noon, and by 3 o'clock, our secretary has typed up this thing it's got a synopsis of what the speaker said. Usually he goes to the speaker's website and takes lots of stuff. So there's a whole page about what the speaker said, not only what he said there, but it also has schedules of what's coming up and who the volunteers are for the doing the monthly program chair. We rotate that every month. So it's got that schedule and other schedules and when we're going to go off and do something at some charity. We work with Silver Horizons a lot and do food packing for them. So that's all scheduled on it, and it comes the same time every week. So if you want to know what's going on in the club, you just go to the latest one and you've got it all.
I will just say, speaking up for Sandia also, that they include me in that newsletter, and that newsletter is outstanding. It has so much information packed in there, but it's not excessive. But if you want to stay up, they really keep their members up to par with that newsletter. And John Crider does a great job with that newsletter. So hats off to Sandia.
Thank you, Richard. Congratulations, Sandia.
When I was asked if I would be the president-elect, the first thing I did is I went to John and made sure he was going to be the secretary.
That's very great. Now we've talked about newsletters, we've talked about email, we've alluded to the website. Anyone using social media as another forum to keep people informed? Albuquerque does.
Yeah, in Deming, we use Facebook, and unlike many clubs, we've really recruited younger members recently, and they go to Facebook a lot, and we share a lot of information there.
They're a great resource, aren't they? Now, does anyone have an issue with people who aren't all that tech savvy and may not be getting the word in any of these ways?
No, we've got a big issue with Facebook, and that's that probably 6 or 7 years ago, we had somebody who was doing a Facebook page for us and was the administrator for it. and they left the club and died or something, and we have no way of contacting them, and we can't get into the thing, so we created a new Facebook page, but we
Good.
can't Facebook to get rid of the old one, so if somebody goes in and puts in Rotary Sandia, it finds the old one that hasn't been updated since 2016 or something. And you can't find the new one unless you go to the link on our webpage, and that will take you to our Facebook page.
Right.
So,
You know what you might want to do, Dean, is talk to Eric Collings, our resident district tech guru. He can help you get rid of the old one.
Okay.
Agreed.
I'm glad you brought that up. We definitely want people, not just our club members, but everyone in the community who wants to find you and find out about you and maybe even join you. You want to make sure that it's easy for them to do that
Who
on
is that,
social
Eric? Eric what?
Eric Collings.
Collings.
Collings. He's on this call, so at the end of the meeting, you might be able to chat with him real quick.
Okay.
Dean, he was in our last group with us. He was the one working with Jen, kind of.
Yeah, on member engagement.
So you've
Okay.
seen him
Yeah.
in that last room that we were in.
Okay.
So what about the people who don't have, someone who doesn't have a computer? Do you worry about them? Do you find a way to be in touch with them?
We don't have anybody like that.
Yeah.
It seems like all of our in Roswell, we were very fortunate to have a very accomplished individual, Jack Swickard, and he sends out a weekly notice to the membership, but it's done, all of it's done on our telephones. I don't know if it comes.
Thank you. You know, I'm being told we have to
Because
move
everybody's
on.
carrying a telephone.
So let me just wind up this session by reminding you that one of the keys to member engagement is treating everyone like a person and making sure everyone feels important. So communication, whatever it is, it's not just about what you put out there, it's about whether it actually happened, whether it landed, whether communication occurred. Jeff, why don't you take one?
Okay. Let me share my screen.
Thanks, everyone. That was excellent.
Okay. Are you seeing the vibrant?
Yes.
Okay. So we just covered the communicate openly. That was great. Sunny is going to also walk us through the kind of the preparing members for future roles. I want to talk about or facilitate a discussion about bylaws, which I love. I should have been a lawyer. I thought about it, but I went in a different path. But in your role as president-elect, how many of you are familiar with your current club bylaws? Okay, I see some hands. So this is, well, I'll put it this way. Something is likely going to happen when you're president that you did not prepare for. And you may struggle to figure out how you're going to address it. And the answer may be in your bylaws. So it's kind of good to be familiar with them. Bylaws get updated quite often. If there is a reason, club kind of owns the bylaws. And, give me a second here. I'm sorry. Room one, I need to assign someone here. So the club owns its bylaws, but they're in alignment with the club constitution that Rotary International provides clubs. So the constitution is given to the clubs. Every couple of years, there's a new constitution that the club adapts. And all you're adding is basically the club name and Rotary Club number. That's fixed. The bylaws are yours, the clubs, but they should align with what the Constitution kind of lays out. But things are going to come up, or things that may need to be addressed in terms of your membership, how the board functions, committees, things like that. So if you're not familiar with your club's bylaws, this would be a great opportunity when you're president-elect to get familiar with them, see whether there may need to be some updates to the bylaws. It's good to have the board members aware, because oftentimes their role and the role of their committees is laid out in the bylaws. So that would be a good thing to do while you're president-elect. Any comments or feedback on that? And if they need to be updated, there should be a rationale. Something changed, or you may want to see a change. One thing that happened with when we had to go to Zoom is some clubs now have members that are no longer in their geographic area. But in order for that to be acceptable, it should be addressed in the bylaws, because oftentimes the bylaws will say the members come from this area. So there may be things that come up where the bylaws need to be updated or adjusted. Does that seem reasonable to everyone? Any other examples from your experience for those of you who have reviewed bylaws about things that are important for presidents-elect to know?
We had to change the list of officers, actually, as our club sort of contracted and became more streamlined. We changed who was an officer, who was on the board.
There was talk in the opening session about things like satellite clubs or
Right.
different times that clubs meet. All of that type of information should be in the bylaws. So if the club decides to change its meeting time or add a meeting time or a different location, all of that information should also be included. So
we recently did a revamp with some very talented people, and so our bylaws are very, very basic. And then we've added a the word escaped me, like an addendum of things. So the bylaws need a certain percentage of club members to change, but things like our meeting time and some of those things that can easily be changed are part of that addendum that don't require full club membership approval to change. So we actually have two documents.
Like a policies and procedures almost.
Kind
Yes.
of,
Mhm.
Yeah. Great idea. You don't need to put every single committee in the bylaws, because that then you have to change it every time that changes.
Right. And that takes a full
This
club membership.
may be an obvious point, but not everybody knows where their bylaws are. So if you don't know where your bylaws are, that would be the first step. And then you might want to make sure once they're updated that everybody in the club knows where they are.
I have a question. It's kind of a practical problem. About 3-4 years ago, we updated our bylaws, had been touched in 10-15 years.
Yeah.
But we didn't have electronic copy. So we had to get someone to retype the entire bylaws with the changes. But if you ask me right now who has an electronic copy, I don't know. If we had to make changes, if we couldn't find where that is, we'd have to retype the whole thing.
So if you're using, if your club is using something like Club Runner for your webpage, Club Runner has an area to store club documents. So your secretary should know how to do that. You as an incoming president, others in the club. But if you're using Club Runner and probably other platforms also, they typically will have an area where documents can be stored and maintained that the members have access to.
Okay, thanks.
Jeff,
Thanks for letting me know.
If I could follow up on that, that's a really good thing, that document section in Club Runner, if you're using Club Runner. And once you understand how to get in there, it's very easy to upload documents. But because we face the same thing in Rio Rancho Sunrise, the documents were in a folder that somebody else had, and they had handed it off, and so we started putting the bylaws and the Constitution and even our board minutes and board agendas and things like that. And you can set up, just like in a computer system, you can set up the different folders for information. And we've started using it also for things such as planning our fundraisers, our galas, things like that.
Good
So
idea.
that everybody doesn't recreate the wheel every time we have that gala. They can go up there, pull down the files, modify them, use them for their year, and then upload them again. So it's a very useful tool. And I would say even make sure your members know how to use it.
Yes.
Because they may be just heading a committee that needs to go up there and pull that information down. So
Thank you,
it's
Richard.
really
That's a very great
worthwhile.
point.
Yep.
Jeff, why don't you go ahead and talk about committees, because you're going to end up having to shuffle people around at the end.
Sounds good. So another element of being a vibrant club is having practical committees. And generally the clubs in this breakout room are small, relatively small. And so one thing that Rotary kind of promotes is that smaller clubs are going to not necessarily have the same number of committees as larger clubs, but they're going to be more in tune with the membership, because in all likelihood, all the members serve either on an overall committee or kind of, or let's say a membership committee. So what is your approach as a president-elect to making sure that your committee structure is practical to the needs of your club? Any thoughts on that? Because again, it says practical committees, which is good, meaning they should have a function, they should serve a role in terms of what you, in your role as president-elect, want to see the club accomplish. So how does that work? Or how do you want it to work?
Well, I'll volunteer that at Sandia, we have so few people that most of our committees are a committee of one.
Right.
We have a, a membership chair, but the membership chair doesn't have anybody helping her, because I mean, she does it all. I'd like to expand it a little bit so that we include with membership some kind of new member orientation. And add that to it and maybe flesh it out a little bit. But other than that, with the few members that we have, we can't have big committees for everything.
So just
that's the clubs. We had big fundraising committees with 25 people on a committee, but you don't do that here.
So thank you for sharing that, Dean. And I think that's kind of what Rotary is kind of sharing with smaller clubs, is that you may have a community of the whole. And it may be that the committee is doing work, let's say during club meetings. So maybe once a month or something, the club is meeting as a committee to get certain things accomplished. That's a very reasonable model for smaller clubs. Anyone else have something similar?
I tell my club that everyone in the club is on the membership committee.
It's
Yeah.
It's interesting too, because Rotary, we're promoting making sure the clubs have goals and has a plan, which is in one of the other breakout rooms. One of the advantages, in a way, of having a smaller club is that it's easier to focus, because you don't have as many people to kind of try to bring in and unify. So having a committee of the whole can work really well, and focusing on the critical few things: membership, service projects, whatever it happens to be. So this is one of those areas where it may be easier to get things accomplished when you have fewer people.
I guess I would offer that the bottom line on this whole conversation is that your committees should look meaningful to the membership and should be tied to whatever the goals are for the club for the year.
So again, something for you to think about as you're preparing to step in as a president is, what do you want to see in terms of the committee structure and what they're going to be working on? And if it's a committee of the whole, that's great, but what are those critical few things?
Can I also add a piece, Jeff, and that is that I think one of the aspects of having having meaningful committees is being ready to end committees. So that you don't just have committees because, well, we formed it 5 years ago and so we still have this committee. If it's outlived its lifespan or its usefulness, then nothing wrong with ending a committee. You know, and then putting something else in its place again, so that when folks look at it, they know that it's practical and it's useful and it's serving a role.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Sunny, we've got 5 minutes to go through
I
the.
saw that. 5 minutes for the final section. We're going to go like the wind here. So this last section is about preparing our members for future roles to ensure smooth leadership transitions. And so there are 2 questions here, are there not? One is, how do you make sure you have a full pipeline of leadership so that you know who's stepping into next roles as life goes forward? And then, of course, how do you make sure they're trained or prepared to jump into their role and to win at it? So let's talk quickly about how you get people to take on the role. How did someone get you to take on the role? What's your process?
We sort of do mentorship where I'm at. Like the old ones help the new
Yeah,
ones for their first year or whatever.
that makes sense. And you're with Clovis, right? So mentorship is a great way to make sure you're bringing everyone along, making sure they know what they need and that they're prepared to step in. Who else? One more.
Yeah. The pearls are, well, they don't call it pearls anymore. They got a new name for it. It used to be potential Rotary leadership seminar, but what do they call it now? They're doing it next month, I think, or
The Rotary Leadership Institute.
yeah, I think that may be
Pet-
it.
Rotary
Are
Leadership
you talking about
Institute.
pets?
No, it's not Pets. Pets is for president-elect.
Right.
This-
This is for everybody. That's the
Yeah,
Rotary Leadership
yeah.
Institute. We're doing
Yeah.
one in person in Roswell in the early April.
Yeah, okay.
Come
Thank
join
you.
us.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's an excellent way to both inspire people to be leaders and then set them up to win at it. Anyone using a nominating committee? No. Mark, Mark and Bianca. Okay.
Yeah.
It's an excellent tool to have people in the club looking to see who the next leaders are and planting seeds along the way for people who haven't thought about being invited, who can start to try it on mentally and see if it's something that might fit for them. What we would encourage is that you keep the pipeline deep, that you have a president-elect, a president nominee, a pen, if you will. And then beyond that, people who are thinking about being the next secretary or the next treasurer or the next club service chair. You know what I'm saying, right? Everyone in the club can be thinking about that. And what do you use besides Rotary Leadership Institute and PETS to train people to be excellent? And mentorship.
Go to the Learning Center.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is kind
Great
of hard.
resource.
Yeah, hard to do, but
Is it?
I'm sorry, Bianca, I didn't hear you.
it make them go to the Learning Center or encourage them to go to the Learning Center. But unless you know, I feel like unless I say, okay, let me come over and let's log in and do this together, that they're not interested in doing it.
It's not the most gripping way of doing things, is it? It's more like it's homework.
That's why I like RLI, because it's in person and it's, you know,
Yes.
you get more involved.
How many of you in this group have done the Rotary Leadership Institute?
I did one of them.
Well, you've got room to do the others now.
Okay. Alyssa's signed up. Hopefully she's coming in April.
Yay. Okay. It's really fun. It's a great way to bring lots of different club perspectives together with more time than we have in this session. to share ideas and discover new ways to be vibrant and effective.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and switch up again. So thank you all very much.
And our topic is club infrastructure, which may not sound like the juiciest of topics, but is actually really critical because without the common foundation, we can't be our greatest and we can't stand together as a Rotary Club and a team. So we're going to cover 4 things in this session. One is communicating openly with everyone in the club. The next, not in any particular order, our governing documents and making sure they're up to date, making sure we have practical committees, and that we are preparing our members for future roles to smooth leadership transitions. Jeff, I'm going to go ahead and kick off with communication, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Jeff, as you may have noticed, is wearing multiple hats today. He's our leader, our facilitator, our Zoom master, our breakout room. Anyway, thank you, Jeff. We appreciate you. So how do we stay connected and informed as a club? This is actually pivotal, is it not? I was sharing with the last group that my favorite quote about communication is that George Bernard Shaw said, the principal issue with communication is the illusion that it has occurred. So this is not just about what we send out, it's about how do we make sure everybody's in the loop? How do we make sure they get what we send? Ideas.
I'll tell you something that I think is dysfunctional.
All
When
right.
we create these email lists, right? And
Yeah.
rather than sending out an email out with putting it all brand new, they just add stuff to it and send it out again, right? By putting, and the subject matter might have been the subject that was 3 weeks ago or something like that. And now they've sent out a message saying something else. And then, sometimes emails, we get so many of them,
Yeah.
that we don't look at them anymore. So
Threads are discombobulating. You're absolutely
yes,
right. So
yes.
what I'm hearing from you is that bite-sized communications are more likely to get seen and understood than something that's added to.
That and the problem you run into of having age groups and their capacity. Some people do not do computers anymore when they get a little older. You have to call them, right? Others want to do text, right? And they only do text. So you have to almost do it in three ways when you want to get something out to your club. And maybe the structure part of that must have, and we haven't created it, has to be that you have to figure somebody to do the texting and somebody to do the emails and somebody to do the calls maybe. But I noticed a lot of times we do stuff and some people aren't informed. So everybody that I bring into Rotary over the years, I send a personal text to every time we do something different. That way I know the people I brought in at least know.
Right.
And then people that don't have phone, don't do email or text, I usually call a lot of the older people and just say, hey, were you aware this is coming on this weekend or this week? But that's part of the problem.
It's a challenge for sure, is it not? And knowing how people prefer to be communicated with is a big part of making it effective. The other thing that Steve's pointing to that I'd like to underscore is treating people as people and caring about whether they get the message or not is actually pivotal. It will make magic happen where nothing else does. You can beat them over the head about reading an email, but nothing substitutes for connecting with them as a human being. So we've talked about email, we've talked about text, we've talked about calling them. Anyone else have other ways that they go about communicating with their club?
Well, we do post in El Paso Sunrise, we do post our speakers schedule a full month in advance on our website. Okay. We have separate tabs for, welcome to Sunrise, the only morning club in El Paso. We have another tab for our service projects. We have another tab for to reach out. If you're interested, click here, a map will pop up. So we do have that side of it, links at the top for Facebook and Instagram. But I think back to Steve's point about email, I've been in a club for 4+ years now, and some people send notifications about upcoming service projects using Google Calendar, and not everybody uses Google Calendar. I never get those messages.
Yeah.
I have to get that information some other way. So I think having a standardized method, whether it's a combination of things, at least having standardized approaches, I think would be helpful.
Yes, absolutely. That sounds like a really great idea.
I think it would be nice that, and I've been thinking about this for my year, is when members hadn't showed up to 1 or 2 meetings in a row, to have someone call them and check on them and just see if they're okay, and give them, get a warm and fuzzy from them, tell them we miss them and we'd love to have them come back.
That accomplishes a lot, doesn't it? And someone in one of our previous meetings suggested having cards on the tables at the meeting where people could write a note to an absentee. And that way the job of reaching out to absentees is shared, and they hear from lots of people who know that that they're being missed. One last thing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is Kirby Warnock from the Fort Stockton, Texas Rotary Club.
Hi, Kirby.
We send out an email with our newsletter on it every week, and we also print it out and put it on all the tables at the meeting also.
Great.
So that's the two things we do.
That's great.
Excellent. Thank you. And one last thing, just one last thing is make sure that you have structures in place for getting feedback from people. Communication's a two-way street. You want to make sure you hear from them about how it's going, whether you open up the meeting for feedback, whether you have surveys, whether you have people responding. Maybe you even do emails that have a return receipt requested, so you know they're opening it. That's all I want to say about that. Make sure you communicate both ways. Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. So we're going to talk about club bylaws, and I get emotional because I love them so much. So I'm curious, since many of you are presidents-elect, how many of you are familiar with your current club bylaws? Cool. So for those of you who may not have raised your hand because we're not seeing everyone, it's really important when you're a president-elect to really become familiar with your club bylaws, in part because when you are president, something is likely going to happen that was not planned, that in order for you to lead the club in addressing that thing, that you need to use the bylaws to help. I don't know if that makes sense. So it could happen the last day of June, like the last day you're president. So you can't like slide in June and say everything is going to be great. Something may happen in June, and it's just good to kind of make sure that you know what's in the bylaws, because that may help you and the others in your club address whatever that situation is. And bylaws are owned by the club, so they get updated as needed. If something arises where you need to make an adjustment, whether it's a different club meeting time, or you form a satellite group or things like that, or if you change the committee structure, all of that should be addressed in the bylaws. So the bylaws get updated as needed. The other element of bylaws is that Rotary International provides clubs with a club constitution, which also gets updated every couple of years, but it gets updated by Rotary International. We don't own, or we don't make adjustments to the Constitution other than adding our club name and Rotary Club number. Everything else is standard across the whole world. So I don't think this upcoming year there's going to be a communication to you all, because I think the last club constitution was in June of 2022. So you may not get a communication about the constitution. If you do, then you should make sure that your club adapts it. But the bylaws should align to whatever is in the constitution. You want to make sure that, we are, even though we've got differences among the different clubs, we're still Rotary clubs. So it's really good for you to get familiar with them. It's good for the board to get familiar with them. And if you need to make adjustments or amendments, that you should have the opportunity to do that as a club. So for those of you who are familiar with bylaws, what is your experience with information in the bylaws that are useful to you? I mean, for me, it's all useful. Go ahead, Michelle.
I will say that bylaws are just like a bad word. Because it is, and I work in the nonprofit world, so bylaws are something that I have to deal with on a continuous basis. I think one reason why people get so discouraged with the bylaws is because we have always been groomed to believe that they are that bad word. And I know that our club's bylaws are incredibly outdated, as I'm sure the majority of the clubs are. And I think one reason why that they have not been changed as often is because people try to make it much harder than what it is. And, really, your bylaws don't need to be this 40-page document. They really just need to be the meat and potatoes of what your organization's goals and values and policies, procedures. I don't know if some of the clubs have separate policies and procedures, but it doesn't have to be as damning, I think, as everybody makes it out to be. And honestly, coming from a club that has those incredibly outdated bylaws, I think one of the biggest favors that other club members could do for people that are coming in is to go ahead and get those bylaws updated, because it's almost like breaking that generational curse. And if you get them started to where they're revisited on an annual basis, it does make it so much easier to tackle the big project.
I'm gonna cry. That was beautiful. We should set up like we should have Michelle be like district bylaws officer.
No, we should not.
But that was awesome.
It's demoralizing to members to have bylaws that don't reflect what you actually do. It's an out of integrity. So getting it cleaned up is a great gift to everyone. Thank you, Michelle.
And that's one of the reasons why it's in this, Be a Vibrant Club, and with presidents-elect and president-elect training, is that if anything needs to be done to the bylaws for you all that are incoming presidents, now is the time to think about that and get all that kind of figured out, rather than waiting until July to go through all of that. So it was part of like your planning and preparation with you and the incoming board and the committees. This is a good time to be thinking about what, if any, changes we need to make to the bylaws, how to make sure the membership is aware of them so they're not that kind of bad, evil, stuff. So that was great. That was great.
I have a question. Like our bylaws were updated about 4 years ago. And, when we talk about doing votes and stuff like that, we normally have a board meeting, we do voting. But during COVID and stuff, we started doing votes like on charitable contributions and stuff like that by text. It is voting, but we don't have anything in there that says a vote can be conducted by text. So do you think that should be updated?
And maybe more generally, to say votes can be conducted electronically, so that you can include email, text.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because you're still voting, but it's just the way you do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, And as Michelle was saying, we don't want them to be so complicated and detailed that they don't become meaningful. If the current language is kind of open, then it's fine. But if it says voting is done this way and you change the way, then that change should be reflected. So it really kind of depends on what the language currently is in your bylaws. But we don't want to make it overly complicated, because the more detailed they are, the more likely we're going to have to change them often. So I think that's where the kind of balance is.
Yeah, Jeff, you've hit on an important point about keeping them open-ended as much as possible. Last year, we did a complete rewrite of our bylaws that hadn't been updated in 5 or 6 years. Already, I've asked our club administrator to do a cursory review based on our board meetings that we've had over the past year to say, are there things that you've seen and experienced and heard during our board meetings and regular meetings that we need to make any adjustments, at least consider a review of it. And it should be something every year. Again, you don't want to make it too detailed, because as you say, then you're tweaking too much. Right. So I think as open-ended as possible, and that comes down to the words specifically that are being used in the documents as well.
Thank you. Okay, Sunny, do you want to go ahead and do the succession?
Why don't you go ahead and do committees, because then you'll have to get us all back together.
Okay, so let me share my screen really quickly here so we can go back to the Be a Vibrant Club. Okay, so now we're going to talk about this one down here, the bottom right. And by the way, there's no like particular order or sequence to these, but sometimes if you get to like the bottom right, we think they're less important. Practical committees. So again, as part of your preparation to be president of your club, how are your current committees set up to accomplish what you want to see accomplished? Because if your committee structure is really sound right now, then you're probably going to kind of keep it going. But there's also opportunities to make adjustments either to the makeup of your committees or what their purpose is, what they're supposed to accomplish. That could be reflected in your bylaws if you're going to make changes, or if the club is going to make changes. So what is your notion now about kind of the makeup of your committees, what their function is, and what types of adjustments do you feel you should make as an incoming president to make the committees more effective? Any thoughts?
I want everyone speak at once, please. Are you pleased with how the committees are working in your club?
I have a question about committees as it pertains to other clubs. Currently in our club, our committee chair we don't have a quarterly or semi-annual update from the committee chair about the progress of their committees. Is that something that other clubs request or require of their committee chairs?
So if I understand your question, which is a great question if I understand it, one thing we talk about, and it may come up at PETS, but if clubs have, let's say, quarterly assemblies, so instead of having like a guest speaker, it's kind of like an internal operational meeting, that would be a great opportunity for committees to report out on what's happening. It may happen more often than that, but it's really important. You know, Sunny facilitated the discussion about communication. So to have the committees be communicating to the membership what's happening, what's working well, where we may have some roadblocks is really important. Otherwise, they're kind of working in a silo. So things like club assemblies or minutes from board meetings, things like that, it's just important for the membership to be kept in the loop on what committees are up to. I don't know if that addresses your question, but it would be great to hear from others in terms of how the committees communicate with the membership.
Every time we have a board meeting, our president of the board, the following Rotary lunch meeting we have, she does an overview of what happened in that meeting, which would identify anything the committee chairs would say. So the membership actually gets an overview. It's it's not great detail, but at least they get told what we voted on and what we're working on and those kind of things.
Great, thank you, Steve. Anyone else? So we, again, just this is the time as your president-elect to be thinking about the current makeup of the committees, what you want to see them accomplish the year that you're president. Perhaps your club is going through like a strategic planning process and there may be goals that you want to see the club accomplish. And if that's the case, how do you want to engage your committees to kind of take ownership over those goals to help move the club forward? Any thoughts on that? And if you do want to make changes, again, bylaws would be an appropriate place to make sure that the changes are addressed.
Jeff, I'm just reminded that one of the most potent things a president can do is issue clear charges to the committees, rather than just leaving them in charge of some amorphous thing called membership. What specifically do you count on the committee to accomplish during the year? And that's not just warm bodies, is it? It's having an orientation program, it's having retention strategies, it's fellowship, it's all of the things that keep members there.
Okay, so something else to think about. Any other questions or feedback on your club committees? Okay. Oh, Steve, go ahead.
So you're saying the training of new members should fall under orientation, should fall under the membership?
I think that's one reasonable place to put it, don't you?
I do. It's just we never, we tried it a couple times and for some reason it just has never caught hold on the group, and I don't know why. But even when I was the membership chair and I'd offer to have classes in the evenings or to talk to people, you have maybe 2 out of 7 show up,
Yeah, it's tricky. Go ahead, Art.
No,
just waiting.
But I mean, we're not really doing it actively now. I don't think, are we? And
yes, we orient every new member before they're inducted. It's just not the whole club is invited. Let me just quickly share that in the last session, Marty Padilla from is it Del Sol? No, it's Del Norte.
Del Norte.
Shared that they do a quarterly Saturday morning 1 or 2 hour session where all the committee chairs and all the new members come and learn about everything in the club all at once. What they do, what their charge is, what they're up to, what are you interested in participating with? And that might be an effective way to do it. You want to find what's going to work for you guys.
Okay, we've got a few minutes left. Sunny, do you want to walk us through the preparing members for future roles?
Thank you. Yes, I will. Thank you. We're going to go like the wind, everyone. And as we talk about preparing members for future roles to smooth leadership transitions. There are 2 pieces to this, are there not? One is finding the new leaders and the other is making sure they're prepared to win at their jobs. So everyone has challenges, I think, in terms of finding next presidents-elect, next presidents-elect nominee, new officers. Do you have strategies that work for that?
Not currently.
Well, then it's an opportunity, isn't it, for invention?
Yes.
There is a proposed process by which a nomination committee is selected in October and nominations are presented to the club in November, and then the elections are posted in December. and everyone tells RI by mid-December. In general, planting seeds well in advance of that is a really good idea. When you see people who are prospective leaders, let them know that your eye is on them and that they are invited to consider trying that on. Making sure the job is clear, that people know exactly what they're getting into, so it's not just a huge amorphous thing, can be very empowering. And then one-on-one conversations that talk about what's involved and what kind of support you have can also be useful. Other ideas, anyone? Okay, how do you train them once they're on board? Is anybody doing any onboard training? What are some of the Rotary resources for preparing members for leadership roles?
I think there's the Rotary International portal, which has a wealth of information about the training programs out there.
Yeah.
Yes, Harold, thank you. The Learning Center.
The Learning Center. And actually, you know, as I have my checklist of things I'm contemplating for upcoming, but one of the things that I want to encourage, not insist, but encourage, is to anyone coming into a new role is to take the time, get their login credentials, log into Rotary, the Learning Center, and take the course. I mean, most courses are 15 to 30 minutes, and that's what they say, but it actually takes about half that time if you actually just follow along with it. It doesn't take much at all, and it helps gives the base of what they need to understand and ask questions from there.
Yes. Brilliant approach.
It really has improved over the last couple of years. I think they've really done a good job of making it more user-friendly. I mean, it's you know, it's self-learning. And I think they've done a really great job with that.
You know, that in itself would be a great lunch class, you know, showing that portal and all the classes are available and the importance of getting your login. And something we don't have that I know of for new members is to get them their login, right, or their password.
Good point.
We should have that as part of the orientation.
Steve, that's such a cool idea. Why have we not implemented that yet? I'm making a note. Thank you. The next level of excellence for Rotary is not only the officers have my Rotary sign-ins, so do all the members. How many of you have done Rotary Leadership Institute? Bob and Steve and Jeff and me. It's actually a great resource for everyone, not just incoming officers, but every Rotarian can get a lot of value from this. Getting together with people from other clubs, kicking around ideas, sharing ideas, getting new approaches to issues, and learning how to be an effective leader. As you may know, we're doing an in-person one in Roswell in early April. And if you haven't done it yet, we invite you to join us. If you have incoming officers who would benefit, bring them along. It's really an extraordinary thing. Normally 5 hours per session, serial Saturdays, but we're doing all 3 sessions in a day and a half in Roswell in April.
What is the date for that?
April, I want to say 4th and 5th. Does that sound right?
I think so. It's on the district website.
5th and 6th. Matt's holding up fingers. It's on the district website.
And will that be offered again?
Eventually, but possibly not in the near future. The next ones will probably be on Zoom and they'll be on consecutive Saturdays, or not consecutive, but serial Saturdays.
Okay.
So if you want to be in person, come to Roswell.
I thought we had one scheduled and I thought it got canceled.
It was rescheduled, not canceled, but rescheduled. The facilitators had health issues.
I have not seen anything on it and I already signed up for it.
You should have received an email telling you that you were automatically transferred to the next one unless you say otherwise. Take a look, talk to Bianca Cheney in Roswell. She'll make sure
Okay.
you're.
Yeah, because I canceled hotels and everything. Okay,
Yeah, it's
Sorry
Friday and
about that.
Saturday, the 5th and the 6th of April.
got it.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate you. I know we have to sign off now. We're going to rejoin as a whole group. Thank you, everyone, for your kind attention and participation. We'll see you back in the main room.